Two of my earliest loves, Judaism and poetry, are deeply and inextricably linked. The Torah describes itself as shir, poem or song. Much of our liturgy is poetry, and poetry can often be offered as prayer. Why? Because with few words, poems give voice to complex truths in ways that move us rather than inform us. Secular and sacred poetry helped anchor us as a people through our centuries of wandering. A surge of poetry came out of the Holocaust, and Israel may have the highest per capita production of poetry worldwide and the highest number of poetry readers. Poetry collections of Yehuda Amichai, Israel's beloved national poet, are sized to fit in people's back pockets and purses. Many Jewish writings speak to our intellect. Jewish poetry speaks the language of the heart. So today, exactly 50 years since the Yom Kippur War of 1973, I offer you this poem by Israeli poet Avraham Balaban titled October 12th, 1978. At a Tel Aviv department store, a stooped-over woman writes a date on a check. She writes, 12th of October, 1973. 78, not 73, calls the cashier, laughing, then freezing in his seat, murmuring, "What can be done, ma'am? What can be done?" In this brief verse, Balaban captures the national trauma that was the 1973 war, a trauma reverberating till today. Something within this woman stopped on that Yom Kippur. Did she lose a husband? A son? Both? Or was she left paralyzed by the injury the nation suffered as a whole? At first, the cashier laughs, thinking it is a careless mistake, and then he too freezes, realizing they are all forever changed. The Yom Kippur War was not Israel's bloodiest, but it shattered the Israeli psyche. Israel had emerged from the Six-Day War of 1967 with an air of invincibility. So when leaders were informed by an Egyptian spy, by King Hussein of Jordan, and by their own intelligence that war was imminent, they weren't fearful enough, and they disregarded these warnings. This failure of leadership left Israeli troops as easy targets. The liturgical poem, "Who Shall Live and Who Shall Die," was a tragic reality on that day of atonement. Alongside the devastating loss of life, the David and Goliath myth crumbled, with Israeli bravado giving way to crushing vulnerability. Israel emerged from the war betrayed by its government, by its military leaders, and by its own vision of itself. On Yom Kippur 1973, enemy attacks jolted the Jewish nation into a place of humility and self-reckoning. I was curious how our congregation and clergy reacted to what was happening in Israel at that time. So I looked to Temple Emmanuel's archives. I haven't found much yet. But I did come across a 1976 work by a young poet from the congregation that I would like to share with you now. Here it is on the screen. I'll read it for you. "I like to live in America because I am a Jew. I like to pray to God, and I'll bet you do too," by Sarah Reines. Yes, I am that poet. This poem was published in the ARC, Temple Emmanuel's religious school yearbook. As you can tell, I was an earnest 7-year-old who felt secure as an American Jew and grateful for the religious freedom my country provided me. My national and religious identities were fused. In 5th grade, Mr. Mark Wilner, who is still teaching Temple Emanu 5th graders today, had my class memorize the Colossus, Emma Lazarus's poem set on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. It was a grind to memorize that poem. But after I did, I felt so proud that the words of a Jewish woman poet were selected for this sacred purpose. I recited the Pledge of Allegiance every day at school as a prayer, and the Shema in this sanctuary like a civic declaration. Both texts resonated within me as poems affirming home. Shortly after I wrote that poem, the religious school and clergy presented me with a gift that I still have and treasure today. My Shalom, My Peace, paintings and poetry written by Israeli Jewish and Palestinian children in 1974. This book changed my perception of Israel. Until then, Israel was an otherworldly place of legend, magically transforming from desert to forest, one planted tree at a time. But as I read these poems in this book, Israel suddenly became real. I was intrigued by the unfamiliar name of the children and their hometowns, but mostly I was stunned by the poems and paintings which revealed childhoods vastly different from my own. For example, 10-year-old Jewish student Idan Breyer from Ashkelon. Give us strength to forget the terrible nightmare of war, the strength to smile and happy be, to live on in our home, our state, and free. Live on through Yom Kippur days, hear the shofar blow and not the siren scream. Year after year, remember those who fell in the strife. It is they who entrusted us with life. Or 14-year-old Palestinian Israeli Gasub Serhan from Kfar Yafia, who wrote, "In my dream, O mother mine, I saw an angel with wings pure white, lifting Moses and Muhammad up to the skies and demanding they shake hands and be wise." I returned to the pages of this book again and again, troubled by the dangers that these children faced. I wondered who the enemy was when everyone was a victim. I felt connected to these children, but I couldn't explain why. But that tangle still felt far from me when I closed the cover of that book, Living Comfortably in America. It was easy for me to turn away. That changed when I moved to Jerusalem for my first year of rabbinical school in 1992. By the way, that was the year that Israel passed the basic law protecting human rights, now under very severe threat. Shortly after arriving, I met Bassam, a Christian Palestinian living in East Jerusalem. He was taking the same intensive Hebrew course as my husband, and we all quickly became friends. Bassam's parents often hosted us for lunch in their garden, shaded by olive trees planted by his great-great-grandfather. The evening of his brother's wedding, the branches sparkled with lights as we danced and feasted with other guests. After returning to the States, we kept up, which in the early 90s meant writing aerograms and sending cassette tapes with recorded messages and music. But after a few years and a couple of moves, we misplaced Bassam's address and we lost touch. Every so often, we tried to track him down, but we were never successful. This spring, I spent 3 weeks in Israel, concluding with a tour of the West Bank. Our final dinner was in a family-owned restaurant in East Jerusalem. Figuring I had nothing to lose, I said to the owner, "This is going to sound ridiculous, but do you know someone in his mid-50s named Bassam? He has a brother, Ibrahim." She responded, "Bassam? He's Christian, right? He lives a few blocks that way." A customer overheard, hit Bassam on his speed dial. 15 minutes and 30 years later, my friend was again by my side. Muslim customers applauded, watching their Christian neighbor embracing this American woman rabbi. The wonder of this land, Israel, Palestine, a shared home. Bassam and I only had a short time to catch up, and what he said saddened me. His family is among the last of their Christian community to live in the neighborhood. Tensions within the Palestinian community and military and political threats coming from Israeli authorities makes life there very difficult to manage. Most of his close friends and family are scattered now around the globe. Bassam, though, is not interested in moving. He wants to remain in that house where his family has lived under Ottoman rule, then British rule. In 1950, they found themselves living in Jordan. In 67, East Jerusalem was occupied by Israel, and then in 1980, it was declared annexed. Jordan, Israel, Palestine, Bassam said, "I honestly don't care what it is. I just want my kids to be able to go to school, to make a good living, to enjoy our lives. I just want us to be regarded as full human beings, as people who belong here, as people who have always had their home here." Contrast this with a new friend I made during that recent trip. Avi is a security guard in his late 20s, living in Ein Kerem, a tranquil neighborhood on the outskirts of West Jerusalem, home to Christian holy sites and artsy cafes. You don't find many single young adults living in Ein Kerem. Avi explained that he lives there instead of Tel Aviv for its quiet. But he is realizing he craves a quiet he may never find in Israel. He wants refuge from the chaos and tumult and hostilities and shame. Avi is close to putting a down payment on property he found in a bucolic forested area. I asked him, "Where?" His answer, "Ukraine." When I reacted, he said, "It's what I can afford. And if I can open my door and hear birds and see trees, what does it matter if I'm in Ukraine or Italy or America? Quiet and green, that's all I need." The irony deepens. Avi's great-grandparents came from Ukraine and fled during the war to create a new beginning in Israel, that patch of land alive with the promise of a safe, productive future for themselves and their descendants. Now, only a few generations later, their Hebrew-speaking, army-trained Sabra descendant is planning to leave his ancestral homeland for the country they fled, a country where Jews have suffered some of our most vicious massacres, a country which is currently a war zone. One man is compelled to stay one is pulled to leave this land they both call home. We read in the book of Leviticus of a bizarre plague that will infect homes in the land of Israel. If we see colored streaks lining the walls, we must immediately tell the priest, who begins a process of examination and purification. The house is cleared of all people while walls are scraped, deeply affected stones and timber are removed and replaced. The house is replastered and ultimately purified. The idea that a house could be so diseased that dwellers have to temporarily leave for the sake of their well-being upends the notion of home. Home is meant to be a refuge, a place of safety, and ideally a place of sanctity. But that is potential, not promise. Our Torah recognizes that no place, not even the sacred land of Israel, is protected from dangerous contagions. It's up to us to recognize their presence and then to work to eradicate them, no matter how long it takes, no matter how much it takes from us. Because with time and effort and determination, the home can be healed and made whole. I learned here at Temple Emanu that Israel is my homeland, a place of safety for Jews in a world that has time and again been proven dangerous for us, a place where I belonged even before ever being there. I learned here at Temple Emanu that while Israel is our Jewish home, it is also home to others, to Druze and Christians and Muslims, to Baha'i, to people of so many faiths. And because of that sharing, we are all kin. I learned here at Temple Emanu that Israel is a place of epic beauty and violent conflict, a place that somehow provokes the best and the worst of who we can be as Jews and as human beings, and that we must strive to be the best. I learned here at Temple Emanu a lesson clearly embedded in Israel, in our feelings about Israel, in our relationships with Israel, but relevant to so many other areas of our lives. Every moment holds contradictory truths. It's a lesson laid out in the poetry of our prayer book. The great shofar is sounded, the quiet, still voice is heard. God is both Avinu and Malkeinu, close and familiar, and distant and mysterious. It's a lesson powerfully expressed by Yehuda Amichai, who writes, "A man doesn't have time in his life to have time for everything. He doesn't have seasons enough to have a season for every purpose." Ecclesiastes was wrong about that. A man needs to love and hate at the same moment, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, with the same hands, to throw stones and gather them, to make love in war and war in love, and to hate and forgive, and to remember and forget, to arrange and to confuse, to eat and to digest what history takes years and years to do. Temple Emanu helped this child embrace the complexity of Israel in the 1970s, a time of tremendous crisis. 50 years later, we find ourselves at a similarly critical juncture. I will do for this generation's children what my rabbis and my teachers did for me. We will continue to expose our children to the many truths of Israel, a country of poetry and medical miracles, ancient ruins and cutting-edge technology. They will learn that Israel is known for hospitality and hope, that Jews and Palestinians work towards coexistence through education, science, environmentalism, social welfare, peace projects, civil rights, and the arts. And our children will know that as Reformed Jews, they will always be welcomed as tourists, but dismissed there as Jews. That Israel is the only country in the world where it is illegal for their rabbis to do their weddings. They will know that Israel is a country defending its democracy while occupation has impeded democracy for more than half a century. We will encourage our children to learn, to love, to visit. In fact, we are encouraging them now. Rabbi Davidson and Mike Whitman, our new director of lifelong learning, are leading a family trip to Israel this December. Keep your eyes open for information. We would love for you to come. We encourage everyone to visit. If you've never been, or if you've been many times, each visit is a new opportunity for points of connection. And when you're there, give yourself and give the people of Israel the gift of engaging with the magnificent diversity of those who call it home. Talk to everyone. They are talkers. We learn most about a place by knowing the stories of its people. Like Avi, more and more non-Orthodox Israeli Jews are increasingly finding themselves unable or unwilling to remain, and yet, at the same time, these people, frantically applying for European citizenship, are pouring out to the streets, hundreds and thousands of them, every Saturday night, 40 weeks so far, fighting for their home. The Israeli folk song Ein Li Eretz Acheret has become the anthem for today's pro-democracy movement. Written decades ago by poet Ehud Manor, it expresses what we know regarding our homeland in the East and our home right here in the United States of America. That love for one's country sometimes demands speaking out in fury against what that country is doing. It is an act of responsibility. It is an act of love. The words to this poem have been spoken or sung by every segment of Israeli society, including by Palestinians. They have even been spoken on the floor of our own capital in the days following the insurrection of January 2021 and after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. The cantor and I offer this poem now as a prayer for the lands we call home. I have no other homeland, though my land is aflame. A word in Hebrew alone pierces through my veins to my soul. With aching body, with hungry heart, here is my home. I will not stay silent that the face of my land has changed. I will not give up, but keep reminding her, singing in her ears until she opens her eyes. I have no other homeland.
אדמתי בוערת רק Good morning and good Yontif, and what a privilege it's been to be together today. Just a few announcements about this afternoon's study sessions and additional services. At 12:30, we invite you to one of 4 study sessions: Jewish Wisdom on Justice and Mercy, Finding Balance in Our Country and Our Lives, with Rabbi Larry Hoffman and Dr. Joel Hoffman, will be in the Bethel Chapel. Be Fruitful, the Etrog in Jewish Art, Culture, and History, with Warren Klein, the curator of our Herbert and Eileen Bernard Museum, is in Greenwald Hall. You can find the entrance through the 65th Street lobby.